help her get through her teaching with her virtual teacher while I was teaching
Mhm.
my virtual students.
Yes.
And she was, like, completely feral for a good 6 months because there was no one to say, "Hey, I said to do this, make sure you do it." It was just like, "No one's gonna check me, so I'm gonna go do
Yeah.
whatever."
Yes.
And, so, like, having that realization, like, "Wait a minute, I am not okay with feeling like I'm abandoning or neglecting what I need to do in order to take care of," it was just totally out of balance for me.
Yes.
Um, and it did not sit right with me. So I made my exit plan.
Hi, thank you so much for joining the Falling for Learning podcast. I am TD Flenaugh. We have this podcast to help parents and caregivers with having the resources, strategies, and tools needed to make sure that their children are on track for learning and to stay on track for success.
Today, we have a special guest is Dr. Tanitra Scorza. She's a passionate advocate for personal and collective growth, shaped by her upbringing amidst small business ownership and a deep desire to empower underrepresented entrepreneurs. With a career journey that spans various roles, she has honed a unique skill set designed to facilitate transformative experience. Dr. Scorza's commitment to instructional design, coaching, and her background as a professional clarinetist enables her to guide entrepreneurs on their journey to building lasting legacies. As an empowerment alchemist for legacy builders, she partners with clients to unlock their potential, clarify their vision, and develop strategies that align with their goals, ensuring they face challenges with unwavering confidence. Dr. Scorza's mission is to help her clients create legacies that stand the test of time, all while preserving their generational well being. Thank you so much for joining us,
Thank you for having me.
everybody. We always start with a check in with me. And I am super excited today about our guest because I've known her for so long because she's my sister. My sister. Um, she is the one that she's my first student, the one that I taught how to read when she was a little kid. And, one of my success stories because now she's Dr. Tanitra Scorza. And we'll talk to you about the great things that she's done professionally in education and as a parent. All
Awesome.
right. All right. So, what can you tell us about what hooked you? What do you remember about what hooked you into learning as a kid? What hooked you into learning as a kid?
That is a great question. What hooked me into learning? I think, um, quite honestly, I think I know I definitely looked up to my big sister. And so I would see you doing things, and so I would just, want to copy what it was you were doing. Um, And I think one of my early, like, very much self-motivated, intrinsic, deep desires to learn was around music. And again, there were a lot of people around me who were learning music, learning the clarinet and in band and things like that. And so I was like, oh, I could do that too. And I started teaching myself piano and then I was old enough to sign up for band, and I went very, very deep into that, practicing many, many long hours,
Mm,
daily, and signing up for all of the things that I could sign up for, youth orchestras and, honor bands and
yeah.
honor orchestras, like all of those things, very, very deep into that. Um, and so I think that was just I think, part of it is just my wiring, like, I just like to go deep into things,
Mm,
because it's cool, I like learning new things.
yeah. All right. Thank you. So tell us about beside, you got tell us what hooked you into learning. Can you tell us more about your college and your university experience?
Yes, so So we grew up in Alaska, and
Yeah.
as beautiful as it is, I was most definitely eager to get to the sunshine. And so back in the day, before the
Mhm.
interwebs, we had these big fat college books, and it would have like every single university and
Mhm.
college edition that was published in the library, and I would go to the library after school, and I would just be reading through those college books. So I was like, which Southern California college am I going to next? And
Yes.
so I did apply to 3 because that was what I was told, like, "Apply to 3 and have your top choice and your middle choice and your." So I did that. I got into 2 of the 3, and UCLA won my heart. I love the campus. It was beautiful, bright, open, um,
Mhm.
and so I went to UCLA for undergrad. I studied, clarinet performance and pedagogy. Pedagogy as in the study of it's like the study of learning, particularly in children. Um, so I studied that, and then I did my master's at UCLA and also went on to do my doctorate at UCLA as well.
Oh, so cool. Yes. So she has deep knowledge and understanding about this. And so your career path, tell us about that.
Yeah, so while I was completing my doctorate program, I actually had my firstborn. And while I was at UCLA, we would go and do community outreach. We would go to like schools in Compton and we would teach music there. And they were, like, "Oh, you're the music program." I was like, "Wait, but we just come here a couple days a week after school and we're like college students. Where's your, robust music program?" And, they just did not have that at the
Hmm.
time. And I had that growing up. It was just part of the curriculum,
Yes.
K through 12. And so that didn't sit right with me. So, right after my completing my doctorate program, I was living in a predominantly Black neighborhood in Los Angeles, Southern California. And I was like, okay, so it's time for my son to start learning music.
Yes.
Where's the programs at? Oh, they're in Santa Monica and they're in, Culver City maybe, and they're in these very affluent areas that are not predominantly people of color. And so I set out to change that and provide a high quality music education program, world-class music education program for my community so that my son and everyone else who looked like him could have something to participate in. And so I ran my music school and I did that for 5 years.
Wow. Yeah. Such great things brought to the community, finding that hole and helping to fill it. And you now are a mother of three. And
Mhm.
so we also want to talk about that because you had your experience as a teacher and, how did you deal with balancing all of that?
Yes, so after that, I went into the classroom, so I got a general education credential, and, again, I was in the classroom for 5 years, and when I was leaving, I did have that's by that time, I did have a 3rd child, and it was during the pandemic. It was, very, very challenging to manage all of that because I was trying to teach my then kindergartner or, help her get through her teaching with her virtual teacher while I was teaching
Hmm.
my virtual students.
Yes.
And she was like completely feral for a good 6 months because there was no one to say, "Hey, I said to do this, make sure you do it." It was just like, no one's going to check me, so I'm going to go do
Yeah.
whatever.
Yes.
And so, like having that realization, like, wait a minute, I am not okay with feeling like I'm abandoning or neglecting what I need to do in order to take care of it was just totally out of balance for me.
Yes.
Um, and it did not sit right with me. So I made my exit plan. And that's what I do. I'm like, okay, let me go ahead. And I don't like to wallow in like, oh, I want things to be different. Oh, why is it this way? I'm like, okay, time to make an exit plan. And
Yeah. Yeah.
so I my exit plan was back into entrepreneurship actually. After my initial experiences with entrepreneurship with my music school, I felt like there were things that I really, really needed that I did not have. And
Mm,
so as part of my exit plan, it was getting that knowledge and skills that I needed in order to not just run my own business, but to also make sure other people are getting that support and that capacity and that knowledge and skill that they need to be successful in entrepreneurship as well, especially people in my community, people who look like me, people that I resonate with. So that's what I'm doing now. And I'm working from home, which
yeah.
makes it a lot easier to manage the kids' schedules because they have schedules.
And just so you guys know, she has a span, right? 14, 8,
Hmm.
and 2, 14, 8, and
Yes.
2. So, yeah, so they all have different schedules. They're not like two kids going the same place.
Right.
Three kids going three different places. So it's quite a bit to manage. So it's great that you were able to get a work from home uh, employment.
Hmm.
Mhm. So right now you're doing the coaching, right?
Yeah, so I'm doing coaching. I do coach entrepreneurs and founders, like founders of nonprofits.
Okay.
I also do a lot of organizational development. So I am part of my exit plan from transitioning. I studied instructional design, which is more, for corporate um, creating learning um, courses and classes and things like that, particularly in a corporate setting. Um, but how that translates to working with individuals and with nonprofits that are not corporate is that there's usually, and then my business development comes into this. There's usually some organizational development that needs to happen. So maybe they're used to kind of doing things, just, doing things, but it's not written down somewhere so that if they're sick or if they need to hire someone or if they need to go on vacation, there's not a something that's written down that somebody else can just pick up and run with. So I help them do things like that. And it may also include infrastructure building. Um, so I think it's very creative. And it's I love seeing the light bulbs turn on when you're like, oh, yeah, that's a great idea. I should do that. Let me do that. And then I can help them do it.
Yeah, so that's great. But because that's sometimes the issue. You've been in the classroom like myself, and you know that some of the most challenging students, like those behaviors come into play, like you said, when the parents aren't able to really see and check in on what their kids are doing because maybe they have this weird work schedule. They might work at night. They get to see kids very little because they're getting off, the kids are asleep or whatever. Um, so having an exit plan, having maybe you may have to create your own income through entrepreneurship so you could be in control of your schedule is really important, which is a key part, making sure your kids are on track for learning and stay on track for success. It's us being present and us being able to have the time and the space to really check in on our kids. So yeah, contact Dr. Scorza for more information about coaching if you need to, prepare yourself an exit plan or start getting onto a business or building up a business, maybe a side gig that you have that you need to have more substantial income. So it's really important. So I just want to pivot because we want to talk about something even more important because you have your three kids and you do have a teenager, and this podcast does really specialize in helping parents with those teenage years, those tween years. And one of the things that a lot of people have talked to me about is their kids with technology, right? So,
Mm.
mentoring are you doing online, and how does that even maybe look different for your 8-year-old than it does for your 14-year-old?
Yeah, so with my 14-year-old, he has a phone. It's an Apple phone, and I mention that because with iPhones, there's a lot of you can lock a lot of things down. So you can have time where they just cannot access certain apps. It used to be an app, and then, one of those updates, Apple just kind of merged it into their basic technology. So there's ways where, they have to request permission to do certain things at certain times. And then there's time limits. So after X number of hours or minutes or whatever, it'll just lock down that app.
Hmm.
So we definitely we do not have the kids are not able to access apps without those child protections on, whether it's the iPad or the iPhone. Um, of course, well, I won't say of course, because some 8-year-olds do have phones.
All over the United States, 75% of children don't know how to write well. Add that to the fact that so many people out there are trying to silence the voices of those who have been oppressed and trying to prevent them from telling their story. Who's going to tell your story? If your child doesn't know how to write well, I have 2 books to address this issue: The Rewrite Method and The Rewrite Method Workbook. Make sure that parents know what to do, that educators know what to do to get their children to write better, and just not write better, but love to write. Make sure that your next generation could tell their story and they won't be silenced. Go to fallingforlearning.com today to purchase your set. Join us for Well Educated Wednesdays every Wednesday on Instagram Live at Falling for Learning. It is a free parent question and answer session where parents can ask questions, learn about resources, strategies, and tips to make sure their children are on track for learning and stay on track for success. That's every Wednesday on Instagram Live at Falling for Learning. We look forward to seeing you and helping the next generation thrive.
Ours does not. Yeah. She will not have a phone for a while.
Okay.
But that is definitely, um, the iPad is definitely child protected as well.
Okay. So good. So if you have an iPhone or an iPad, there are already built-in information about that.
Mhm.
Good. So we'll have like some more information for that in the show notes. So later that you can click on that and see if you don't already know about it. Um, and that's interesting. Yeah, we don't know. Like that's always a controversy too. Like when to get your kid's phone. And yes, some 8-year-olds may have it, and then some families. And I've even heard of, especially in small schools, where kids like parents band together and they're like, we're not going to get our fifth graders a phone. Like we've agreed as a community, and obviously that doesn't happen everywhere. But maybe something that you want to bring up at your parent meetings or something like that, like how to handle that, because it does put pressure. There's a lot of pressure, right? Uh, if I have my fifth grader, a phone, or half of us have it, half of us don't, or whatever. Some of those parents, of course, have been together for a while. If you have the same parent group in as a second grader, third grader, fourth, it's kind of easy to start talking together and making a decision. Obviously, after it's already happened and half the kids have them, it's like when am I going to take my kid's phone, drop my contract or whatever, it's harder. So you may want to start those conversations early. If you do have like an 8-year-old or something like that, talk to your friends group about that or and how to handle it. And you could agree to disagree or whatever it is, but having those conversations early may be really important. So keep that in mind. Um, Okay, so let's talk about next. Like, one thing is like, do you have the code? Like, because that's one of the things, of course, everyone's phone has a code or like the face recognition. Like, can you get in your 14-year-old phone if you want to?
Definitely. Yeah. Yeah. And the way that it's set up too is that there's a parent account and
Okay.
there's sub accounts. So,
Okay.
it's definitely within the system set up as the parent has certain controls, and then this is a child's account. But absolutely, we can absolutely get in there, um, read those texts, read those. He's not on social media either.
Okay.
Um, he's tried it. Oh, I need to be in this social media thing for, this class. Like, oh yeah, I guess they're gonna have to talk to you in person.
Okay.
Um,
Mhm.
he's 14, and social media for young people is just like, what's the good? I don't know. There's just so much negativity around it. Um, and there's they have text strain or text where they text each other text strains, like text
Mhm.
whatever.
Mhm.
So they have those, like, the people that they need to talk to, they either have access to them in person or access to them via text. I personally don't see what the purpose is for social media. Now, YouTube is also considered social media,
It is.
um,
Mhm.
but to me, it feels different because there's not a lot of, like, BMing and things like that can take
Mhm.
place. Um, and he is on YouTube, and we've definitely had to have conversations about what is appropriate and what isn't appropriate. And also just, like, helping him understand that the things that you put into your mind, those are influencers on how you interact and how you show up in the world. So if you're having a lot of input from things that are very negative or things that are very violent or things that are very um, explicit or was not child appropriate, that's going to impact how you show up. And so talking to him about, like, what's the best and highest use of your time? Like, do you need to watch the 65th video on, you know, whatever? Or is there something, are there other goals that you really want to be working to, that you really could be working towards right now? So having those conversations and also listening to books, because our commute, like a lot of people, it's some
Listen to
time. Like,
books. Is that what you said?
yes, yes,
Oh,
listening
nice.
to
Okay.
books. So one book that we got him probably about a year ago now is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective Young People or Youth or Teenagers, I think it was. Um, and after he read that book, we definitely saw a shift in his behavior. But there are books that I listen to for my personal development, and I'm like, y'all gonna get a jump start on personal development yourselves. So, like
So they're
positive
listening too.
intelligence, yeah. It's like this morning, he and his sister have kind of been getting into it a little bit. Like they had a week and a half where they were playing together and having a good time. And then several days in a row, they've kind of been like, yeah. So this morning, a book that I happened to be listening to, one of the chapters was about managing conflicts. And so, we listened to almost the whole chapter. And then before he got out of the car, I was like, "Well, what did you think about the book that we were listening to?" He's like, "I know where you put it on." It's not why I put it on for myself. However, you've been having some conflicts recently, so this is also to your I'm glad you got something out of it too.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Mhm.
just trying to foster, the soil, add some nutrients to the soil so there's some positive things to grow out of it from within, not so much always from this is what you should and shouldn't be doing.
Mm. So like some of that intrinsic motivation, like self confidence, you know, yeah, interesting. So, what about at home? Like, 'cause something that we see a lot, like in certain classrooms, and like kids are like just addicted to that phone. So even if you don't have social media, you could still just be texting a lot or just watching YouTube a lot, whatever. So how do you? What kind of policies do you have for using the cell phone or limits on screen time or something like that?
So locking things down definitely helps. Just having like certain apps don't unlock past, before a certain hour. But sometimes
Okay.
it is still okay. Go put your phone in my room. You'll get it back tomorrow. Because
Okay.
the the way these phones are set up, it is set up to be addictive. And even for us fully developed adults, it is addictive. And so I would expect nothing different for a not fully developed teenage brain for it to be addictive. So sometimes it's like, yeah, you're just go leave it in my room. You'll do it back later.
What might
Um,
prompt you to say that though? Like what are what causes you to say like just put it in my room?
repeated reminders about putting the phone down and getting something done. Like, okay, you're supposed to
Mm,
be folding clothes, but you're also watching YouTube. And I walked past here twice and you were looking at YouTube and these clothes were refolded. So, you get a couple of warnings about it and then, all right, just leave it in my phone. Just leave the phone.
just like a natural
Um,
consequence. Okay, after the couple warnings. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Okay, cool. So we've talked about some safeguards that we put in place, and but we know even the United States has been hacked. So when you find that maybe, he uh circumvented one of these apps, your block or whatever, how do you handle that or how have you handled it?
This conversation, it's many conversations. It might be losing access to the phone altogether. Um, and it's a little bit different now that he is in high school and uh, and he's also enrolled in college. And so he has to travel to, so it's in a very controlled space, but he has to travel there. So
Mm-hmm.
it is a little bit different. Like there is more of a necessity there because he is handling some of own, you know, his own business. So,
Yeah.
but the issue usually is happening at the house. So, okay, now you're at the house. You don't really need the phone right now. Go ahead and put it away.
Okay.
Um, and, continuing to have the conversations, continuing to um, foster opportunities for, um, developing the relationship so that the conversations encourage him to be self-reflective
Okay.
and want to make a better choice.
That makes sense. I know some of us will blow up and get mad at our kids, which, we talked about before on this podcast about how you shut yourself out of the kids' lives. Even though they might listen to you, they're not really listening to you anymore because you really damaged that relationship. So helping them to have that relationship and making sure they're reflective. And yeah, we have to remember, they do make mistakes. They're not perfect. And giving them some space and grace, right? Like, I know that you made a mistake. I'm not happy with you, but not like blowing up at them. So it's really important. If you haven't reached this issue before, that you think about what you'll do ahead of time so you don't just blow up. Because our kids are going to make mistakes. They're not going to make the mark and kind of plan for how we handle that rather than just blowing up because we expected them to always meet that mark it's better to be more proactive. Think about what you're going to do when it happens because they're not perfect. So something will happen. Count on it,
It's coming.
Okay. All right. So the other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is how do you handle like that online friendships? Because we I shared before on this podcast, there's like statistics that show at least 15% of they have 15% of kids have close friends that they met online. So how have you handled that, or do you plan to handle it if you uh, deal with it?
When I heard that, I was surprised because I was thinking, well, where are they coming from? But it makes sense if you have social media for sure. It makes sense if you have if they're playing video games where there's a chat room associated with it. Um, I think for us, it's just monitoring the chats. Like every once in a while, it's like, let's scroll through these chats and see what's going on. And we go through the messages.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so from that perspective, there haven't been red flags that have come up where we're like, wait, who is this person? What are they talking about? What is going on here? It's been like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, it's, fun teenager stuff.
Okay.
Um, yeah.
And one of the other things that a listener has talked to me about is how there's like unlimited access to explicit materials, right? Like before, back in the day, people have like sneak to the library, hide in a corner, and but now it's really easy to get. And how might you handle this with your child with explicit materials?
Hmm, that's a great question. It happens and it can definitely happen. And um there can be, even if you feel like you have a good relationship and you guys talk about things, there could still be hiding around it because there might be shame or fear, like, oh, I'm not supposed to be looking at this. So like I
Hmm.
know I'm not supposed to be looking at this. So 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 trying not to, like you're saying earlier, trying not to blow up about it and trying not to create more shame and guilt and all of that around it. Just being like, okay, so this happened, it's not supposed to. Um, and every kid is different. Some kid is they're just gonna be like, oh well, yep, it happened. Some of them they're gonna feel so guilty that they're like, ah, that was really awkward. Like I don't know. I don't want to go through that again.
Yeah.
And so they'll stop or they'll slow down and then also just, having more of the kick down the door, what's going on in here? Moments where it's, no space is safe. And then also like we don't what allows some of that to be possible is that we don't allow, like they can't lock the doors, you know.
Mm-hmm.
You can lock the front door, but other than that, we're not locking doors to the bedrooms because, we need to
Okay.
be able to get in there. Um, but also respecting privacy, like a little tap and then, what's going on. But just more monitoring, more conversations, more enriching of the soil, um, and trying not to create a scenario where they're shutting down and shutting you out.
Yeah. I found with my daughter that I just had curiosity. She wanted to know about stuff. So we did have conversations about sex and stuff like that because they do want to know. And rather than just hiding things, like explain this. And of course, you want, people to be in committed relationships. There could be, diseases, just telling them pros and cons about different things and helping them get information and find information. Because everything's not information out there. Sometimes it's just, you know, entertainment and it's not based on facts, they're
Mhm.
looking at. So some of it is like curiosity and trying to help them talk to them about it and it's really important too. But yeah, I think shame causes more problems because they're more likely to hide, not tell you about things. Um, it's very difficult though. Yeah, our kids have like unlimited access to things that, before it was easier to hide it. And obviously they could look at it on someone else's phone too, which is someone else was pointing out. Um, but having conversations about, what's real, what's not real, and what's healthy, what's not healthy, is important too.
Yeah, definitely.
Um,
What's healthy and not healthy. And then the other thing I want to say too is, and this might seem totally unrelated, but having bedtimes and having like a set sleeping and waking schedule, because
yeah,
I'm not monitoring anything in my sleep. So if I'm asleep, you're asleep. Like,
yeah.
fortunately I'm definitely an early riser, like I said earlier, kids have a very wide spread. I get up with the 2-year-old, and I'm fine with that. My husband stays up with well, the 8-year-old is also a night owl, so he stays up later with the kids, but when he's going like, nobody's staying up past us, like, anything
Hmm.
could happen. So, um,
Yeah.
and the other side of that is, okay, the sun is up, it's 8 a.m., it's 9 a.m., like, even though it is a weekend, go ahead and get up so that you'll be tired tonight. If you're sleeping until noon, you're not gonna be tired tonight when we're tired.
No. Yeah.
So,
Makes sense.
yeah, yeah,
Having schedules, yes, of course, because yeah, it's because yes, because you can't be watching anything at any time, especially if I'm not up to watch you what you're watching, what you're getting into. Yeah, that's a really key detail that you brought up. I'm glad that you did because some people forget about that, especially when you have that weird schedule that doesn't quite match your kids. You have to make it match as much as possible, or think about an exit strategy or another plan so that you can have more access to your child and more control over supporting them through their development because this is very important. What are some final takeaways for parents that might be struggling, with electronics, technology, all of those things?
but I think it's really great to have, some technology detox time if possible, where you just
Mm,
it's, all the devices are gonna be in my room, and that's where they're gonna be for now. Um, and, our brains are very malleable. Even as adults, they're very malleable. We can get used to things. We can get used to, you know, getting into the habit of doing certain things. And so new habits can be formed, new neural pathways. So, just having that break, I think, is really helpful, even if it's just a daily, after 7 p.m., all the devices are just in the closet. We're not gonna worry about it. We're not gonna look at
mhm,
them. We're not gonna be on them. And, just taking some time to do some old-fashioned things like reading or board games or, even watching TV together, I think is definitely a break from being on an iPad or a phone or something like that.
mhm. That makes sense. So great. And if people need to want to find you, they want to know more about your coaching services and making that pivot to, more access to their children and more control of their schedule, where can they find you?
Sure. You can either find me on LinkedIn, Tanitra Scorza. You can also find me on Instagram at Crystal Clarity Coach.
And we will make sure that you could get it right there in the show link, the summary there, so you could have access to Dr. Scorza's brilliance. Thank you so much for joining us today. Thanks again, Dr. Scorza. Uh,
Thank you. Thank you for having
thank
me.
Thanks again for supporting the Falling for Learning podcast. New episodes go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. You can watch us on youtube.com at Falling for Learning, or listen on all major podcast platforms such as Apple, Google, Audible, Spotify, and much more. For more resources, visit fallinginlovewithlearning.com. We really appreciate you. Have a wonderful week.